Hello everyone, welcome to lesson 3 of SQL Server Management Studio class, protecting data integrity with constraints. In this lesson, we will get the understanding about the primary key constraint, which we have already covered in our previous lessons, with the foreign key understanding, how to create foreign key constraint. After that, we will cover some check constraints with alphabetical value, some default value constraints, and method 2, enabling and disabling check constraint, and how we can alter our table, how we can remove constraints through SQL query. So these are topics we will cover in this lesson. Okay, so let's start with the primary key constraint. Here in our previous lessons, we have designed two tables, department table and employee table. Primary key constraint we have already covered in our previous classes, but let me just give you the basic idea about it. So before that, let me just open my employee table. Right click, go to edit top 200 record, and here we can see all the records. Primary key constraint means, primary key means we want to enforce uniqueness in our columns. For an example, I don't want to ask my program, I don't want my program to accept duplicate values under employee ID column. If I right click this and open in a design view, you can see one key icon, yellow color key icon in front of my employee ID. That means this column is primary key column. Program will not accept duplicate values under employee ID record. So let me just show you. Try to enter some duplicate record. We have already 1119. If I try to enter 1119, name as anything, and jump to the new record, program shows me this dialog box. And here you can see clearly it mentioned that no row was updated, and the reason behind this is the data in a row 14 was not committed. So data in this record is not committed. We have already this data in our employee ID column, so program is not accepting it. If I enter this record as 1131, program will accept it. Okay, maybe some other constraints also we have here. Let me enter like this: excel@gmail.com, and person belongs to North, ID is 1200, belongs to 6, department 6. You can see this ID as this one. If I try to enter 1119, program will not accept it. Okay, so the reason behind this is primary key constraint. Now, understanding of foreign key constraint. What is foreign key constraint? Before that, let me close this design view. This is my employee table, and here you can see if I right click, open my department table. In my department table, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6 departments data. And in our employee ID table, you can see all the employee IDs and the department ID. That means if I say, what is the department name of Harry employee? The department ID of Harry is 4. So we can jump to this table and check, okay, the 4th department is transport. That means Harry works in the transport department. Now, if user try to update this one as 7, there is no 7 ID, no department 7 ID in this table. But if I try to enter this value for HAI, this user where the employee ID is 1131, program is not accepting this. Okay, and the reason behind this is because I have set up this department ID field as a foreign key field corresponding to this table, department table. Now here department ID is primary key. If I open the design view of my department table, you can see here primary key icon. Now here department ID is a primary key field. Okay, that means program will accept only the unique record. In this case of my employee ID, I want to set up this department ID as a foreign key field so that program will accept only the values exist in this table. Okay, if I delete the foreign key constraint, right now if I try to add department ID as 8, program is not accepting it because there is a foreign key constraint. Okay, now let me just close this one. Let me edit this value, close this record, and close this table. Before that, let me just delete the foreign key constraint. To delete the foreign key constraint from this department ID, which I have already set up, select this field, right click, go to relationship, select your foreign key constraint, press delete, and this is deleted now. Now if I try to enter records which are not in department table, program will accept it. For an example, this one as 8. Okay, once we delete, we need to save this table also. So let me just save this table first. Yes, I want to save. Now if I try to enter 8, program is accepting department 8 because now there is no foreign key constraint between my employee table and department table. Okay, so let me edit this value as 1 and from scratch close this one. We have already opened this table. Now set this column as a foreign key constraint column. Right click, go to relationships. Under relationships, click add button. Here you can see the name of your foreign key constraint. Go under tables and column specification. Click here and click on this ellipse button. Here is my relationship name. You can edit this also. After that, primary key table. My primary key table is my department table, where my department ID is my primary key field. Okay, and my foreign key table is my employee table, and in foreign key table, department ID is my foreign key field. So this is my foreign key field from employee table, and this is my primary key field in my department table. Now if I click OK and close, save this table. Yes, we want to change. Open my employee table, right click and edit top 200 records. Now in this department ID table, if I try to add 8, program will not accept because 8 department ID does not exist in my department table. Let me just show you. Right click, go to edit top 200 records. Here you can see 1 to 6 only. So guys, this is the design view, and using the design view we can add foreign key constraint in our table. Okay, now let's jump to the SQL query. How using SQL query we can add foreign key constraint in our program. So to add the same department ID, set the department ID as a foreign key constraint using SQL query. Let me just delete the foreign key constraint first. Close this one, and here right click, go to relationship, and I am deleting this because I want to set this now using the SQL query. Right click and save. Now open new query wizard. This is my query wizard, and here I will write the query to set foreign key constraint using query. The code I will use is I want to alter my table. Which table I want to alter? I want to alter my employee table. This table I want to alter, and I want to add constraint. Okay, what constraint you want to add? I want to add foreign key constraint, where my foreign key is in my employee table. This is my employee table department ID. So department ID is my foreign key constraint to which references to which table? Its references to department table. It references to department table and department ID of department table. Department table. No need to write two. References only make sense. And then the name of the field is department ID. So I will write here department ID now. Department ID. We also need to assign the name of our foreign key. Name of my foreign key is fk underscore employee table and department ID. So this is the SQL query. Using this SQL query, I will add this foreign key constraint in my employee table, set my department ID as a foreign key, which references to the department table, and the key in the department table, primary key in the department table is this department ID. Okay, let me repeat this again. We want to alter my employee table where we want to add constraint. This is the name of constraint. What constraint I want to add? I want to add a foreign key constraint, and I want to set department ID in my employee table as a foreign key, which references to my department table. And now here department ID will act as an primary key constraint. So if I select this, hit execute, command successfully created. Now if I open my employee table, let me close this too, open this, right click and edit top 200 record. If I open this in design view, you can see there also this one, right, select, go to relationship, and here you can see fk employee department ID. So foreign key employee table department ID is the foreign key constraint we have just updated using the query part. Okay, so now let's try to update some records as 10. Let's say department ID as 10. Program is not accepting it. And guys, this is very important. This is our primary key and foreign key relationship. Okay, now let's jump to the next topic, which is imposing business rule using with check constraint. What are check constraint and how we can use them? Okay, so let me just open my table again to explain this check constraint. Check constraints. When we want to limit something in our ranges, we use check constraint. We apply check constraint. For an example, if I open this employee table and here in this range, salary range, I want to apply a check constraint that user cannot enter values in the salary column less than 0. Okay, so I will add that constraint in our program. To check all the constraint, just refresh your table, and here you can see constraint folder. There is no constraint right now in my program. So very first constraint which I want to add in my program constraint is check constraint. To add that, using GUI of SQL Server Management Studio, click on this constraint, right click and click new constraint. Now this is the way, this is the window dialog box with the help of which I will add my constraint. I will jump to this expression, click on this ellipse button, and here I will write my expression. Now all the check constraint works based on the Boolean result, either true or false. My logical test is if my salary is greater than 0, then only accept value in my salary column. So this constraint I want to add in my program. This is how I want to limit my range salary. This should always be greater than 0. Okay, if you want to assign a specific name to your constraint. For example, this is ck underscore employee table. This is the default name right now when we have inserted it. If I add underscore salary, now this is the new name of my this constraint. And now if I close, save this table, you have saved. Now if I refresh this constraint folder, if I expand, you can see your constraint ck employee table salary. Now let's try to add value as 0. For an example, for this mic, if I update salary column as 0, program will not accept it. So guys, this is because we have updated one check constraint, which is ck underscore employee table salary through GUI in our program. Okay, we can also add constraint through SQL query. We have already updated one salary through GUI. If you want to add constraint through SQL query, same steps we will follow here. What we want to do, we want to alter our table. Which table we want to alter? We want to alter our employee table. I want to add check constraint in my employee table. Okay, so alter table my employee table, add constraint. Which constraint you want to add? Check constraint. So after constraint, write check constraint I want to add. Okay, before that, check keyword also assign the name of your constraint. ck underscore employee table underscore salary space. Okay, so add this constraint, the type of this constraint is the check constraint, and then the logical expression. And my logical expression is my salary should always be greater than 0. So this is the SQL query, everyone. If I select this and execute, program is not able to add this constraint because we have already updated this constraint through GUI. You can see here message, there is already an object named ck employee table salary, and we can see under constraint folder here. Let me delete this one. Right click, go to delete. Yes, I want to delete this object. Now let's add this object. Execute. Command successfully completed. Refresh your folder. Expand, and you can see constraint here. Now if I try to update any value in my table as 0 as salary, program will not accept it. So based on the limits, based on the result, the limits which you want to apply to your ranges, for salary, my value should always be greater than 0. My employee name should always be character. Program user cannot enter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 like this in employee name. That kind of check constraint we can apply in a program. Okay, so now guys, let's try to add pattern mapping constraints. For my employee name, program user can insert only the character between A to Z. Let's say this kind of constraint I want to add. So I will write alter my table. Which table I want to alter? I want to alter my employee table. Add constraint. What constraint you want to add? Before that, let's assign the name to our constraint. ck check constraint in my employee table, name check, and here we have to, for employee name column, this is my employee name column. If I jump here, this is my employee name column. In this column, I want to apply check constraint that program can accept values between A to Z only. If in my employee name, not like the pattern, which is this one. So program should follow this pattern, then only my program will accept the values. So if my constraint is in this pattern, if my values in my employee column is under this pattern, program will accept that only. So this execute, commands completed successfully. Now If I jump to my employees table, let's update this record as H1, again H111. Come here. See, program is not accepting it because it's not under the pattern. Program is not following this pattern. And like operator we use for pattern mapping. If my employee name column is not following this pattern between A to Z, program will not accept the value. Now here if I write hurry, program will accept it. If I write HARI, program will accept it. All the values between A to Z, program will accept it. If I write some special character numbers @1 H again, program will not accept this name. Okay, so you can check over internet also. There are a number of kind of check constraint based on our data type field, what kind of limit we want to assign in our program. We can add check constraint in our program. So now if I refresh my check constraint folder, we can see we have updated two types of check constraint in our program. One is for salary should always be greater than 0. And second, that my employee name should always be between A to Z. Okay, so after check constraint, the next topic which we will cover in our, okay, so the alphabetic values we have already covered. Check constraint, yes, to impose rules on our data set, to limit ranges in our fields, we apply check constraint. Default value constraint, this is very interesting guys, how to set a default value constraint in our program. By default value constraint I mean, if I jump to this department table, here you can see, let me open my department table, right click and edit top 200 record. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 values: marketing, finance, HR, transport, IT and operation. And there is 7 as, let's say, okay, 6 is operations. I want to impose one rule, default value rule in my program. If user enter any value other than 1 to 5, any value other than 1 to 5, I want to add one constraint in my program, default value constraint, that program will automatically accept that value. How to add that default constraint in the program we will cover now. Okay. Okay. So in this case, let's say if I insert now new record in my employee table, let's say 112, and this is Mike, and the name of this is mike@email ID is gmail.com, which is already following all my check constraint, this program 2100. Now if I leave my department ID, program will update the null record in my department ID column because I have clicked checkbox null. If I open this in design view, you can see where is my employee table, design view. So you can see null checkbox is true. So that's why program is accepting null records in my employee table when I update it. Okay, now here I want to apply one default constraint. When user update the null value, automatically insert department ID is 6. If user missed to update the department ID, automatically insert department ID is 6. How we can do this? To perform that, again I will add one constraint, and that constraint is default constraint. To add constraint, we need to alter our table. Alter my table, and my table is employee TBL. Add one constraint. Add one constraint which is a default value constraint. So we need to pass the name of our default value constraint, which is df underscore employee table. Okay, so this constraint I want to add. and the rule I want to apply default 6 for my department ID. Let me just check the field name now. Yes, it's department ID. So this constraint I have updated here. Alter my employee table, add one constraint. Name of that constraint is df employee table, default 6 for department ID. Now if I let me select and hit execute button, commands completed successfully. Okay, so let me just close this table, refresh my tables folder, open my employee table, right click and edit top to 100 records. Now if I try to update new record 1133, employee name as Jack, email ID of Jack is j@gmail.com. Okay, record region belongs to West, salary is 1100. Now if I leave this department IJ as null and jump to the next record, so the data in the row was not, let's check, unique. Okay, so we have already set up the unique key constraint, and there is a j@duplicate value found under the employee ID column. So there is duplicate value. We already have a j@gmailid.com. Let me edit this as jw@gmailid. We have already updated the unique check between my employee ID column, so that's why program is not accepting duplicates in this employee record, which you will cover in your future lessons. Now if I jump to next, if you check, program automatically change my department ID into 6. So guys, this is our default value constraint. Okay, so the number of constraints which we have covered till now in our class, we started with this primary key constraint. Okay, then after that we have covered this foreign key constraint. After foreign key constraint, two type of check constraint for salary and check constraint for alphabetic value between A to Z, and then default constraint. Okay, so these all four we have covered. Primary key constraint check the uniqueness in the column, accept only the unique record. Foreign key constraint check value in the primary table corresponding to it. The same department ID example, if department ID 10 does not exist in my department table, program will not accept it in my employee table. Check constraint to apply limit in our ranges. Default when we want to print the default value. Okay, and now the next thing which we will cover in this lesson, how to enabling and disabling check constraint, and also how we can remove or delete constraint from our table. Okay, so let's start with how we can enable and disable check constraint in our SQL Server Management Studio. To enable and disable constraint in SQL Server Management Studio, I will alter my employee table, because I want to, for an example, let's say disable all the constraints from my employee table. Alter my employee table, no check constraints. Which constraint? All constraints. I want to no check all the constraint under my this table. So select this entire query, hit execute button, commands completed successfully. And now if I open this table, add it up to 100 record, and let's look for that salary constraint where program accept only the records greater than 0. If I update this value as 0, program will accept it. So that salary constraint still available under my folder, but it's not working. The reason behind this is because we have disabled all the constraint using this command. Okay, so at any point of time, if you want to disable any constraint, all the constraint which you have applied in your database, you can use this command. Next is, if you want to enable all your constraint, to enable all your constraint, tbl from my this table, check all constraint. Okay, now if I run and execute this command, select, hit execute. Commands completed successfully. Open my employee table. Here, this one we have accepted when we disabled all the constraint. Now we have now using this command, we have enabled all the constraint again. Now if I enter this record as 0, program will not accept it. Okay, so this is how you can switch between disabling and enabling your constraint using this command. Okay guys, that's simple. Alter table, your table name, no check, constraint all. When you want to enable them, alter table, table name, check, constraint all. This is the step which we follow. Next is how we can drop constraint. If you want to delete some constraint, how we can drop them. For an example, I want to drop this default value constraint from my program. To delete this constraint, I will write my command alter my table, and my table is employee table, and in this employee table drop my constraint. That constraint is df employee table. So this is the name of my constraint. Now if I execute, select this command, hit execute, commands completed successfully. Refresh your tables folder, and there is no default value constraint now. Now if user enter some records, new records, let's say this one is John, email ID of John is john123@gmail.com, value as West, salary as 1500. If I leave this null, program will not convert this into the 6. Program will not assign department ID as 6 because we have removed the default value constraint from our program, and it's null now. Okay, so using this query part, you can delete commands constraint from your program. So after our default command, in our this lesson 3, we have covered how we can disable and enable constraints, also how we can drop constraints. So these all topics we have covered in our lesson 3. In our lesson 4, we will cover about joins. How we can join tables, how we can set up the inner join between table, how we can set up the outer join between table, joins, left join, right join, detail about the joinings, and also the third type of join, which is cross join, and which we also call as a Cartesian product of two tables. So in detail we will cover about the joinings in our lesson 4. So this is about lesson 3. Thank you everyone.